This is 1 teaspoon of sugar. In one single day, your average Brit will have about 12 of these in added sugars. That's about this much, and this isn't natural sugar or fruit sugar. This is added sugar. The kind added to cereals, ketchups, bread, salad dressing, and more. Now in the USA, your average American will have consumed 17 of these. That's about 5 more. That's about this much. Now, both of these are above the WHO's recommended limit of 6 teaspoons per day, but Americans are consuming 40% more. Over the course of 1 year, this means that your average American consumes about 57 pounds of sugar. That's about 26 kilograms. For Brits, it's closer to 35 to 40 pounds or 16 to 18 kilograms. And while American sugar intake is hovering at these insanely high levels, British sugar intake is actually slowly declining. But why? Sugar tastes good. We all know that. And the more sugar we have, the more sugar we want. This isn't cultural. This is how sugar interacts with our bodies no matter what continent we're on. But there's a key difference in how sugar is regulated, sold, and consumed in Britain compared to the USA. And to understand how it all got started, we need to go back in time to the wars. Not the sugar wars, but the real one. In the shadow of World War II, the global landscape was reshaped not just by politics and borders, but by the dinner plate. Both Britain and the United States emerged victorious but hungry. The war had ravaged supply chains. Ships had been sunk, harvests had failed, and global trade was disrupted. And in Britain, rationing had become a way of life. It began in 1940 and didn't end until 1954, about a decade after victory. Now, sugar was one of the most tightly controlled commodities. Families were limited to the equivalent of about 16 teaspoons per week per person. And that's for everything: your tea, your jam, your baking, your birthday cakes for that special occasion. And of course, butter, meat, eggs, and milk were also precious. You had to queue, you had to plan, and you had to learn how to go without. But rationing didn't just restrict. Eventually, it taught. It trained a generation of people to think of food as a public resource, not just a private pleasure. And so, when the war ended, the British government didn't step back. They leaned in. The state became a kind of nutritional guardian. In schools, children received free milk and hot meals. National dietary guidelines were established to keep everyone on the same page and healthy. And eventually, even when sugar wasn't rationed, it remained a concern for public health. It wasn't vilified, but it was managed. The British culture and relationship with sugar developed a kind of cautious undertone. Sweetness seemed to be something that you earned rather than something that you could just expect. And now let's cross the Atlantic, because America, by contrast, entered the post-war period with surplus. Its fields and factories were intact. While Europe rationed, America mass-produced. And throughout the 1950s and 1960s, American agriculture grew more industrial, more efficient, and more political. By the 1970s, the US faced a different kind of problem: overproduction. Farmers were growing more than what Americans could eat, particularly corn. And just like the British government leaned into rationing and planning, the US government leaned the opposite direction, introducing sweeping agricultural subsidies that encouraged planting more, not less. Corn in America became the golden crop. It was cheap, it was abundant, and it was politically protected. Now, what does that have to do with sugar, and how did that mountain of corn create the problem that America has now? Now, before I talk about how corn and a Japanese scientist combined to impact America's sugar consumption, let's talk about the sponsor of today's video, Holi. Holi is a healthy alternative to energy drinks and sodas, and they're all about removing the garbage from the drinks. This means that their mixes, just like this one, are 100% natural fruit flavoring. So there's no sugar, there's no unnecessary fillers. You simply mix the flavor with water in the provided shaker and you're set for the day. Now, they've sent me the Start Set Deluxe to try, which comes with the shaker, as well as 3 of their sample flavors, so you can check out which ones you prefer before ordering the bigger tub. The hydration line contains electrolytes and coconut water. The iced tea options are great for the summer and high in vitamin C, and there's also an energy line with focus boosting vitamins and minerals. I will say that the hydration line specifically has been my favorite this summer, and it's at under 20 calories per serving, so you're not taking on tons of extra calories like you would with an energy drink or a soft drink. The packaging is recyclable as well, so you can just rinse out your shaker and start again with your next flavor. If you want to try Holi yourself, you can purchase the Starter Set Deluxe, which comes in a box like you can see here, and you can use my codes. Use discount code LONDON5 for a £5 off your starter set, or use the code LONDON for 10% off your purchase. Now, as I promised, we're back to the 1970s, when a Japanese scientist named Yoshiyuki Takasaki perfected a process to convert cornstarch into something sweeter, stickier, and far more potent than cane sugar. This was known as high fructose corn syrup, and by 1975, American food manufacturers had started the experimentation. By the early 80s, this sweetener was used in most soft drinks in America and processed foods. And the result was a seismic shift in what Americans were eating and how much of it. Soft drinks ballooned in size, candy bars became denser, cereals became sweeter, even foods not considered traditionally sweet like pasta sauce or bread were quietly laced with sugar. And not because people demanded it, but because it was profitable. Unlike in Britain, there were no government quotas limiting how much of it could be used. There were no nutritional councils publicly warning against its rise, and there wasn't a sugar tax even decades later. In fact, food labeling in America didn't even require companies to list added sugar until 2021. Meanwhile, in the UK, sugar remained sugar. High fructose corn syrup was never widely adopted thanks to EU trade laws and a general cultural resistance. And now let's talk about something a little darker. Because as we've talked about, sugar isn't just sweet, it's strategic. You probably already know that eating sugar makes you feel good. But what you might not realize is how deeply it taps into your brain's wiring. When you consume sugar, especially refined sugar in large quantities, your brain releases a rush of what's known as dopamine, the very same chemical involved in love, gambling, and drug use. In lab studies, rats have been shown to choose sugar over other drugs. And in humans, scans of the brains reacting to sugar light up the same reward pathways as much harder drugs. Now, sugar is not officially classified as a drug, but some scientists argue that it should be at least treated as an addictive substance. Because the effects are similar. You build a tolerance, you have withdrawals, and you maintain a dependency on it. The more you eat, the more you need to feel satisfied. And when you cut back, you'll experience headaches, irritability, and cravings. And these American food companies understand this. It's not an accident. It's by design. In the 1990s, executives at some of the largest processed food companies in the US gathered behind closed doors to discuss what they were seeing: a growing obesity crisis, rising public concern, and foods that were being designed to override human instincts. In 2013, an investigative journalist named Michael Moss broke a story that stunned the public. He revealed that food companies were using something called the Bliss point. This was not just like a marketing strategy or term, this was a precise formula. The exact amount of sugar and sometimes salt or fat needed to trigger maximum pleasure without tipping over into noticeable sweetness. And if you hit that chemical sweet spot, that's when you create a food that people will return to over and over again, even when they're not hungry. So you might say, oh, I don't have a sweet tooth, I can stop the cake, I can stop the cookies, but that's not even what we're talking about. It's so far in most of the foods that you consume that you don't even realize. Foods that don't taste sweet, like pizza sauce, salad dressing, or even whole wheat bread, were often loaded with added sugars because even more subtle sweetness made the food moreish, i.e. you wanted more. One leaked internal American document from a global snack brand basically described the strategy. Sugar wasn't a flavor, it was a lever. It was a psychological tool to lock in brand loyalty from childhood onward. As Moss wrote in his Pulitzer-winning expose, they didn't want to create food. They wanted to create addiction. Now, in Britain, this strategy never fully took hold to the same extent. In 2003, the British government launched the Food Standard Agency's salt reduction program, which gradually pressured food companies to lower salt and sugar content over time. In 2005, school lunch reform began under Jamie Oliver's campaign, getting soft drinks, chips, or crisps, and sweets off of the lunchtime tray. And in 2016, the UK went further, announcing a sugar tax on soft drinks. Most of them reduced the sugar content for the economic outcome of avoiding tax. According to a 2020 study, sugar levels in British drinks fell by more than 29%. And in 2023, further legislation restricted junk food advertising before 9 p.m. because who's watching before 9 p.m.? The kids. The result was a culture that's not immune to sugar, but more skeptical of it. And remember, the UK also has national healthcare. The consequences of poor diet are not just individual, they're shared. There's a built-in incentive to reduce harm at scale. In America, the food industry makes the profit and the healthcare system picks up the bill. And numbers don't lie. America's sugar-heavy diet has consequences, and they show up in hospitals and on prescription forms. In the United States today, over 42% of adults are classified as obese according to the CDC. Another 30% are overweight. That's more than 2/3 of the adult population. Britain isn't admittedly doing brilliantly either. The obesity rate among UK adults is around 25%, but it's still significantly below the US, and more importantly, it's not rising as quickly. Now, let's be clear, obesity is a complex issue. It's not just sugar. It's poverty, access to education, stress, and sedentary lifestyles, but sugar plays a central role, especially when it's everywhere and especially when it's invisible. And the downstream effects are brutal. Rates of type 2 diabetes have tripled in the US since the 1980s. Heart disease remains the nation's #1 killer. And fatty liver disease, which was previously mostly only seen in alcoholics, is now increasingly common in US teenagers who drink nothing stronger than soda. So why hasn't the US tackled this head on? 2 words: corporate power. The American food lobby is one of the most powerful in Washington. It's made up of an alliance of soft drink manufacturers, sugar beet farmers, corn processors, supermarkets, and fast food giants. All of these parties benefit from keeping sugar cheap, accessible, and unlabeled. In 2010, when New York City tried to ban large sodas, lobbyists spent millions to crush it. Even the language has been manipulated. In the 1990s, American guidelines began warning about fat, not sugar, as the dietary villain. Food companies responded by creating low-fat products that were actually high in sugar. Yogurts and salad dressings were all made sweeter and, ironically, less healthy. And that's the truly scary part, because we're not talking about seeing something like this when we're consuming it every single day. The sugars we're talking about tend to be invisible. In the US, a slice of sandwich bread can contain 2 to 3 grams of added sugar. A frozen pizza, up to 10 grams per serving. Salad dressing, tomato soup, healthy cereal, they're all sweetened. Subtly, to hook you. Now, in Britain, manufacturers are legally required to disclose total sugars, and now added sugars are slowly appearing on nutritional labels to make sure that you understand what you're getting yourself into. And now, because of the economic incentives to make sure that we reduce sugar in the UK, the reformulated versions of everything from soft drinks to biscuits are quietly reducing sugar levels in the nation. But in the US, sugar is still often disguised. It's listed under dozens of names: evaporated cane juice, fruit juice concentrate, or dextrose. Unless you're looking for it, and sometimes, even if you are, it's hard to find. How do people make healthy choices when the system is rigged against you even knowing? That brings me to the end of this video. Leave your comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.